Welcome to Leadership Reimagined, where game-changing conversations are reshaping the world of work. I'm Janice Ellig, the CEO and founder of Ellig Group, Executive Search Advisors, where we are reimagining search through our long-standing commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I am delighted to welcome Robin Washington to speak on a competitive advantage, Black women on boards. Robin most recently served as Executive Vice President, Chief Financial Officer of Gilead Sciences, a $30 billion research-based pharmaceutical company, where she oversaw global finance, facilities and operations, investor relations, and the information technology organization. She began her career with Deloitte & Touche, Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, Tandem Computers, PeopleSoft, and just prior to Gilead, she was the CFO of Hyperion Solutions. Robin is truly a financial expert, to say the least, which is why so many boards are seeking her advice. She is currently on the boards of Alphabet, Honeywell International, MasterCard Foundation, Salesforce.com, and StockX. She is also a member of the President's Council and Ross Business School Advisory Board, University of Michigan, the UCSF Children's Hospital Oakland, and a trustee of the Financial Accounting Foundation. She has been recognized for her impactful career, commitment to the field of finance, biotechnology, and the community at large by Institutional Investor, the Wall Street Journal, and in 2017 was named Financial Women of the Year by the Financial Women of San Francisco. Robin, I'm delighted you are joining me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Janice. It's a real pleasure to participate in this podcast with you. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, Robin, with so much talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, I would like to start with a focus on that. And with you as a board director on a number of very prestigious boards here, how you view the role of a director and the board as a whole in looking at the culture of an organization. And what I mean by that is the inclusivity to ensure women and underrepresented employees rise to reach their full potential. So what should boards focus on when looking at the number of women and underrepresented groups in an organization?
Well, Jan, it is such a comprehensive question. I'm sure we could spend the next 30 minutes just talking about this. But if I think about today's environment, boards and leadership are spending a lot more time on talent and human capital management. I mean, employees have choices and are willing to seek alternatives to a greater extent than ever before. This next generation of young adults and those earlier in the career, I think they're seeking connectivity in their work environment. And beyond financial benefits, flexibility, manager quality, and feeling included matter. So I believe it's definitely important to ensure that the culture of an organization is inclusive to attract the best talent. And this has never been a more important business imperative. It's a proven fact that if you create cultures and organizations where everyone thrives, you'll have a competitive advantage. And I say all that as backdrop just because that I believe that DEI is a business imperative, and organizations that create inclusive cultures will perform better. So as a board member, understanding an organization's culture, how it ensures inclusiveness at all levels of the organization, its hiring, promotion practices, as well as how it leverages, in my case, a lot of technology companies or products to promote diversity and inclusion is simply a critical component of our fiduciary responsibility as board members. The way we measure financial performance or other key goals and objectives, we have to pay attention to the metrics and the numbers that help us measure inclusiveness. And I think doing this effectively will ensure that we are performing our responsibilities as a board.
Companies that are more diverse, more inclusive, better financial performance, better reputation, preferred employer. What's the dialogue that you, or the questions you ask in terms of really assessing that? What's a conversation like around the board table?
It's a really good question, Janice, and I think it's evolving. You know, naturally as a board member, you have much more visibility at the top of the organization. And I think that's where you can influence board diversity, C-suite and diversity. And I think that really matters because that's where the precedent setting occurs. that's where we can directly, as board members, hold senior leaders accountable. And this is where diverse leadership can be most impactful, right? And where it's important that if you think about underrepresented groups, persons of color, women, or et cetera, when they see diversity at the top of the organization, it allows the rank and file to feel and see what is possible. So, I mentioned earlier, it's not only about hiring, it is about promoting, it's leveraging. One of the things we look at is pulse surveys. How are people feeling about the organizations? How are different groups feeling about the culture and the values and mission? But I do think that visibility, particularly at the higher ranks of organizations where people can see people that look like them and how they were promoted and how they've built successful careers in organization, makes a huge difference. I mean, I experienced firsthand how much that mattered when I, came across women and persons of color across our stakeholder base in general, whether it was employees or others, how important it was if they would say to me, to meet and work with a capable Black female executive as part of the C-suite team. So again, to your point, as board, the more we can cultivate and ask for that diversity and those practices that promote inclusiveness, I think the better we'll achieve this objective of creating inclusive cultures.
From a recruiter's standpoint, I can tell you that candidates look to see, are there those who look like them? What's the employee group look like? What are customers saying? What are
Exactly.
communities saying? And what are investors saying? So those four legs of the stool become really important if you're not, reflecting all of those constituents.
That's exactly right. I mean, I've even seen more best practices around hiring, being sure that you've got not only diverse slates of candidates, but diverse slates of interviewees as well. And I do think that matters.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Right. You have to have people who are going to interview people, that they can relate to, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
That's very important. Let's talk about the initiative that you've started with Merlene Santel, Black Women on Boards. And you were recently featured in Fortune magazine. And you're joining forces to improve the representation of women on color on boards. Now, only 4% of women of color are on boards currently. So what do you hope to achieve in terms of the number and what time frame? What are you looking to do with this initiative?
Janice, thank you for asking the question. It's been a great initiative, and I have to give Marlene a lot of credit for just the passion and boots on ground support to continue to scale this organization. It's just been amazing success, and I've really enjoyed our partnership. But to answer your specific question, Black Women on Boards was created to accelerate access to board opportunities by enhancing visibility of qualified Black female executives. We know that exposure and visibility matter. And once you're on a board, the opportunities can be abundant. So, Black Women on Boards is all about expanding our networks and highlighting capable, talented Black females to help them secure that first board seat. And we know that the statistics for public boards leave us with room for opportunity. You mentioned 4%, Janice, but private company board participation is even lower. So, given that we have a close proximity to the venture and private equity communities in Silicon Valley, it's a special area of focus for us as this network provides capital to create the next Alphabet, Salesforce, and next generation of successful companies. What we want to do is just to ensure that capable Black females have access to these public and private ecosystems. We want to partner with firms like yours, Janice, and venture, private equity, public company, and others to advance this mission. I think the one thing we know for certain is this is not an issue of pipeline or qualifications. It's an issue of access and visibility. That's what we want to change with Black women on boards.
Access and visibility is so critical. And I know that I've started searches where, the board did not necessarily know these people. but they should have known them, right? So
Absolutely.
in showing their backgrounds, and we recently did this, and we had an African American woman and a Hispanic woman. They only had one search. They took both because they understood that they had an opportunity here. And what we did was we helped them open the aperture because they didn't look at titles as much as they looked at skills, which is really what you're trying to put on your board, right? It's the skill set, the experiences.
That's absolutely correct. I was personally involved in a search where we put a woman of color on a board, and definite experience in the industries that we needed, definitely capable, but was not on the radar of the recruiting search firm that we leveraged. And that's why I think these type of organizations become important, and really creating the networks, because as you know, a lot of board placements are done by word of mouth or through networks. And that's why we believe that getting these folks the visibility that they need, not only with the search firms, but with companies, with alternative investment firms and venture is the way to go here to increase that visibility. Even for me, it's been amazing to meet some of these women and get to know them personally. So when I get called about a board role that I can't take on, I've got a list of capable people that I can recommend with confidence. And so it's going to take all of that to continue to make inroads in this area.
My phone line is always open to receive any of your recommendations.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a cohort that will start this year of, I think we've got about 20 identified people that we're going to spend time with, get to know, and we continue to provide that list of capable candidates to you as well as to anyone else that wants to get access to them.
So Robin, let's turn to you as a Black executive. And you shared that you faced some barriers. How did you turn barriers into opportunities?
Janice, I had great mentors, but more importantly, sponsors that exposed me to opportunities that stretched me beyond what I thought I was capable of. And it forced me out of my comfort zone until I learned to feel comfortable being uncomfortable. A lot of people that know me know I use that phrase a lot because I think it's important. I know now that it's in those moments that when I'm feeling uncomfortable, that I'm truly learning and growing. And most importantly, I'm confident that I can push through adversity and accomplish anything I want to achieve. And it's not that it's easy, but it's convincing yourself that you want it and then doing what it takes to achieve your objectives. Early in my career, I got the opportunity to meet and spend time with a Black female CFO. And I can honestly tell you, this is before I even really thought about being a CFO. I also worked early in a company where we had a Black male corporate controller. And I do think those interactions with both were these subliminal inspirations that inspired me to know that I could one day achieve their level of success.
So, given your impressive career as a financial executive, is that a path that you would encourage more women to take to become a CFO, to become a financial expert as a pathway to the boardroom?
Yeah, absolutely. I think having a financial background and a skill set can really enhance a person's career in so many ways. Knowing how to interpret a balance sheet and understanding finance and accounting, the language of business, is an invaluable skill. Even if you don't want to be a CFO or aspire to have a career in finance. But I do think being a CFO gives you a really unique perspective in a corporation. You are the allocator of capital. You're a partner to the CEO and other business leaders. You're a spokesperson for the company to investors and other stakeholders. It is only second in nature to the CEO. So it's really a unique opportunity and perspective on how to operate and understand a business. And I think a lot of people misinterpret the CFO role as a back office function, but world-class CFOs are very close to the business and help steer and drive the go-forward strategy. Also, as you mentioned, Janice, I think financial expertise is a highly sought-after skill that boards are looking for as well. It's a great entree to the C-suite. And we talk about only 4% of women of color having board roles, but diversity in the C-suite is another huge opportunity. And I think the finance function is one that is beneficial in helping there. But, when I think about Black representation in the C-suite, there's a huge opportunity to further diversify. Only 2% of Fortune 500 C-suite leaders, that includes CEOs, COOs, and CFOs, are Black. And, within the Fortune 500, there are only 6 Black CEOs, and Black CFOs have actually doubled in 2021, but that doubling goes from 12 to 20, not quite double. So there's tremendous upside opportunity to further diversify the C-suite. And I think this is critically important to that topic we just discussed, inclusive cultures.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Oftentimes they really want for their boards a financial expert and a woman, and then a woman of color. So there's great opportunities for women to move up into that C-suite and then into the boardroom. And truly, the numbers you said, truly, we are not there yet. We really have to accelerate the pace of change. I want to thank you, Robin, for the discussion so far. And a quick reminder to our audience, you are listening to Robin Washington, former CFO of Gilead Sciences and current board director of Alphabet, Honeywell, Salesforce, and StockX. The topics we cover, like today's, are all current, and a new topic with a new game changer is released every month. This is a great way to stay current on relevant issues happening around us. Now let's return to Robin Washington. So, Robin, your career at Gilead, you joined in 2008. Tell us about that journey that you were on and how you progressed, and what were some of those defining moments to be, top woman in a very prestigious organization of Black women, and then going on boards.
I was there at Gilead for nearly 12 years, Janice, and it was a very rewarding experience in ways too numerous to mention. As I think back on one of the more defining moments, it was really simply moving to a CFO role in biotech after 20 plus years in technology. As you described in my bio, I didn't start in the biotech space. And, I remember talking to several of my mentors and others who said it was a really bold move. And it took a lot of hard work to really learn the industry and come up to speed. But I have to say, working there as part of a world-class leadership team, at the time, and really bringing life-saving treatments to patients, including a curative treatment for HCV, was clearly the highlight. We really ensured that as leaders that we engage with patients and have them share their experiences with our employees. And it was really rewarding to see how what we did positively impacted the lives of our patients and their families. So, even as the CFO, those experiences topped all the fundraising, maturing of our capital structure, and assisting in scaling and globalizing our business by far. And again, I think that's really what it's about, is world-class management teams that have a vision and being able to execute on them. Again, it was just an invaluable experience for me, and I continue to be very involved in the biotech space today. Relative to boards, my first board experience came from my audit chair when I was the chief accounting officer at PeopleSoft. And they were looking to add diversity on a board. And, as I just said, I joined my first board before I even became a CFO. And it was a sponsor that I had who thought I could bring something to the table as well as learn. And I'm forever grateful for that experience, because it gave me insight into the boardroom while I was still developing my financial career. And I say often, I think I became a better CFO because of that exposure in the boardroom and understanding, how the board looked at issues that the CFO had responsibility for, and thinking about strategy in general. That was the first, and I continued to evolve it over time. As I became a CFO, I was on 2 smaller boards. Both of the companies were sold. And as I came up to speed and got comfortable with, what I was doing in my CFO role at Gilead, I put the desire to be on a Fortune 500 board and my goals and objectives. And I talked to my audit chair and our CEO and COO about it, and they were supportive. And that was the first, and the rest were through relationships or through developing that expertise. And something you said about being a financial expert, I think I've learned through my board experience is yes, I may have the financial expertise, but more importantly, I think good board members are broader than just the financial expertise. So I've really tried to be selective in the boards that I choose to serve on, and that I think I can add value in a multitude of ways, not just as a financial expert, and that I have a genuine interest in the business models and the goals and objectives and mission that we're undertaking.
True. I think most boards look for that financial expertise, but they want you as a strategic partner, really, in terms of
Absolutely.
go-to-market strategies. Yeah. And so, what's so remarkable about you, Robin, is you were on your very prestigious boards, but you started before you were the CFO, which is such a, because your network and you were respected for what you were doing, and somebody said, hey, she could be great on our board, right?
Yeah, it's a really good use case. And I mean, this was a long time ago. This was back in the early 2000s. So you bring up a good point, right, in terms of these skill sets. And so many times, from Black women on boards, everyone wants a C-suite or this. I mean, you and I talk about this all the time, Janice. I mean, if you think about digitization, if you think about, cybersecurity, enterprise risk management, talent, D&I, these topics, things that boards are spending a lot of time on, don't necessarily, all people with the greatest experience don't necessarily come from the C-suite, right? And there are, to your point, functions and skill sets that are gained before you get to the C-suite, which make you very capable of participating and adding value on a board. I didn't feel that I was in any way impaired by not being a CFO on that first board.
No, and your voice was heard, and obviously it was so good, they put you on more boards during your career. So I want to change topics a little bit about leadership, because you were certainly a leader in the companies where you were at. And during the CNBC interview, you talked about the difference between EQ and IQ in leaders, and why the EQ part was so important when it comes to leadership. So talk to us a little bit about that and how that really is important on boards as well.
One of the skills that I think developed leaders have is empathy. We've seen the importance of empathy as we've had to pivot operations and engage with employees, shareholders, and other stakeholders through the global pandemic, social injustice, the macroeconomic crisis that we've been dealing with over the past 2 years. I remember interviewing a panel of CFOs and many talking about the inability to walk around, given the fact that we're all working remotely. And, I remember asking the question, what's the one skill set that you think has become more important as a leader? And it was about empathy. So I think getting back to that next generation of our workforce, authenticity and leadership, it matters to many. People want to feel connected. And I think the best leaders are adaptable. And at times they show vulnerability and the ability to connect with individuals and meet their teams and employees where they are at times. And that takes emotional intelligence in addition to raw intelligence. And good leaders have this. And I think if you think about the board role and experience, it is about, collaboration with people that you're not working with on a regular basis. So I think EQ becomes very important there. How do you meet? How do you relate? How do you leverage all that experience that sits in a room and comes together on occasion to really help advance a company forward? You have to have sensing capabilities that you're not going to see because you're not boots on the ground every day in these organizations. So I think it's a critical skill set for 21st century leaders and board members.
Times have changed. We didn't have a playbook during the pandemic, and it's really been taxing on CEOs, senior leadership, boards, it really has made you rise to new occasions, to new issues. And as you look at the boards going forward, what do you think is going to be really important for those who want to aspire to be on a board, as you have done, but going forward in this new reality, as I look at it? It's no longer a new normal, it's a new reality. What do you look at that as a board member? What do you see will be important going forward for those currently in seats and those wanting to be on a board?
I think you have to really be a continuous learner and engaged in a different way. I talked about those sensing capabilities. Um, and just having to focus on more and more things that matter, that drive company success. So flexibility, agility, the ability to identify leaders. These are things I think that always mattered. I think you've seen continued conversion of industries and spaces. For me, I'm seeing more convergence between healthcare and technology. But it just requires, again, I think agility and speed and a level of understanding of how so many factors can interact and impact what you're trying to accomplish. I mean, I think about all the things that sit on on the plates of the CEOs and the leadership team of the boards that I sit on. It's daunting across so many areas. And so the importance of leading and prioritizing and leveraging skill sets and know-how, I think it's going to change the way we think about our teams. One person that I can think of that I think has become more important to boards as well as to leadership teams is the role of the CHRO. And I think we need strategic people persons or chief people officers in ways that we've never needed in the past. So, it's hard to say you can stay in front of every trend, but I think just keeping a pulse of change and having the capability to not only react, but be proactive around what's happening in your industry has never been more important for boards and for leadership teams.
I think you're so right. It's all those areas of expertise that you want to have a multi-specialist board, right? Of many different areas. And the role of the SHRO is so important because it is all about people, right? It is all about the culture. If you don't have that, it doesn't work. So it's
Exactly.
that's a very good lens, I think, on a board. So, any parting words for advice for our audience that I know really was inspired by everything you had to say today, but anything else you would add?
There's so many other things we can talk about, but one of the things I think a good parting thought, Janice, is, I was privileged to work side by side with General Colin Powell on one of my boards. And as a result, he became one of my mentors and I developed a relationship with him. And as you know, he's written many books, but one in particular focused on leadership principles. And I always think about rule number 13, which is perpetual optimism is a force multiplier. I am extremely optimistic about the future that I see for women and underrepresented minorities in the C-suite and the boardroom going forward. And while we've made progress, as we've talked about, there is still a long way to go. And I think it's more important than ever that we have champions and sponsors to ensure that this optimism becomes a reality. Because I think if we have this, if we create inclusive cultures, we're going to build extraordinary companies where all employees thrive. And I think the world will be a better place if we accomplish this.
Oh, well, we could go on a whole other conversation about Colin Powell. Oh my goodness, those are such great words. And being an optimist and coming together, right? I mean, really working across the aisles, across gender differences, ethnicity, and all of it. If we come together, we can be so powerful. Robin, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your career, your inspiring story, your words of advice, and the initiative that you are leading with Marlene in terms of changing the picture of corporate boardrooms to have more women of color who can then impact the culture in that organization.
Thank you. It's appreciated. As I said, we're going to need those champions and sponsors to really make inroads and progress. Thanks for all you are doing to help in this regard as well, Janice.
Yes, and thank you to our audience who will also be part of this initiative and for tuning in today for this game-changing conversation on Leadership Reimagined. You can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, or visit our website at elliggroup.com. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Robin Washington.